Hello, Greeley. Here is your agenda overview for the April 7th Greeley City Council meeting. In the name of keeping it short, I'm going to just highlight the biggest things and put the rest in the body. Right now, there's only one thing on regular agenda, which is to go into executive session in order to discuss the city manager position and the hiring process, which they've put on hold. Everything else is in consent agenda, and unless it's pulled, we'll pass in one. There are some really interesting things that come up in the consent agenda. First off, they are doing an introduction and first reading of an ordinance to modify the 2026 budget, showing a shortfall right now of money that's not appropriated that in order to spend would have to be accounted for within the budget of $56,588,000. Of that, they're saying $34.4 million is in order to appropriate to previously approved requests, $20.5 million that they're looking at getting in water and sewer related bonds. So essentially, this is borrowing from investors. It's kind of like an IOU where they ask for money in order to take care of projects, and then we pay those investors back with interest based on the revenue from our water and sewer rates as residents. Then there's $6 million about in Keep Greeley Moving funding that they're still needing, $4.8 million for improvements on 83rd Ave, $1.7 million to continue fire department capital projects, and $1 million to continue with water and sewer capital projects. Also in here, as I had said, they're bonds, they can borrow up to $50 million. It said it won't be more than that. And some of this is looking at construction of infrastructure to access the Terry Ranch Aquifer, purchasing of water rights in order to meet Greeley's future water demand, which I also think is interesting, as they've repeatedly stated that we're doing great in the water region, but apparently we need more. And then the other thing that I found really, really interesting, I think this is probably for me one of the meat and potatoes of this. They're doing an introduction and first reading of an ordinance amending the city code to adjust the inclusion area of the West Greeley GID. So that is the district that was made for Catalyst and Cascadia that is to fund the infrastructure that needed to be out there. Well, what I found is in order for them to change it, what they're looking at is they're looking at lands that they may annex to Greeley, or they're removing property that won't benefit directly from the GID. They don't specifically state what they're adding or removing. It looks like they removed a little bit on the southeast corner, but namely, they are adding Carestream. When I looked at the map, the Carestream property that Windsor has written formally twice, has come to 2 city council meetings to demand that Greeley leave it off of our annexation plan. Greeley insisted on adding it in January to our 3-mile plan, stating that it didn't mean that we would annex, it just meant that we could in the future, is suddenly now being added to a GID that is for Greeley properties. So I found that really interesting, especially the fact that they don't explicitly state it, they just put the map. There is another introduction and first reading of annexing the West Lowell property. This one actually looked kind of decent. It is by 59th Ave in between Poudre River and F Street. They actually want to designate it in the same meeting as a conservation and agricultural area. So I thought that was good. And then the last 2 things. One is they do have items to officially create the West Greeley Oversight Committee, as well as designate April 16th as a special session in order to interview applicants. Just a reminder, those applications are due, I believe it's April 10th. Initially, they'd said 13th, but I think they moved it up to April 10th. And then the final thing that I am glad that they've added, but also there's some frustration around, is they are adding an introduction and first reading to an ordinance amending our election procedure. So what they want to do is they want to specifically define what a special municipal election is versus a general municipal election. This matters because in the petitions that got circulated last year, they took the general federal presidential election as the number for how many petition signatures there were needed. I talked to someone who was a former clerk who said that they have never read it that way, that a general municipal election has always meant odd numbered years. But they went off of, well, it doesn't explicitly say. It's kind of vague. So they are explicitly stating now that general municipal elections are odd number years and special municipal elections are even numbered years, regardless of whether or not there's city business on there. But just so that you know, had they applied that as they should have last year, where there was a requirement for over 4,600 signatures, It would have only been 2,100 had they gone off of the general municipal election. So those are some of the biggest things. As I said, I'll include the breakdown of everything in the text. If you have questions, let me know. I will definitely be there tomorrow. I intend to speak, and I hope that some of you will too.